All right, let's jump right in, because today we're not just looking at a famous Bible verse, we're cracking a 2,000-year-old code. We're on the hunt for the real meaning of a phrase that has literally shaped history. And here it is, Matthew 16:19. I mean, think about it. For centuries, this has been the verse used to define the authority of the church, to grant power, and to draw lines in the sand. It is a truly monumental piece of text. But here's the big question, the mystery we're diving into. What if that whole understanding, the one that shaped empires for 2 millennia, is built on a massive misinterpretation? What if the real story is something else entirely, something way more dramatic? Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, we've got to start by looking at where the traditional ideas even came from. Let's call them the usual suspects, the 2 main views that have really dominated the conversation for centuries. So you've got 2 main camps, right? On one side, the Catholic view sees this as the bedrock for papal authority, the power to set church law, to discipline, the whole shebang. On the other side, the Protestant view generally sees it more as the church's authority to teach the law. You know, what's permitted, what's prohibited. But do you see the common thread here? Both are all about rules, governance, and who's in charge. Okay, but here's where it gets interesting. There's a huge problem with both of these views. They share this critical flaw, a kind of historical error called an anachronism. And honestly, this is our first big clue that maybe we've all been looking in the wrong places. This timeline, this right here is the key. You see, the traditional interpretations, they all lean heavily on rabbinic texts like the Mishnah and the Talmud to figure out what binding and loosing means. But look, those were written hundreds of years after Jesus lived and taught. It's kind of like trying to understand Shakespeare but using a 21st century slang dictionary. The context is just completely wrong. All right, so if those later texts are a dead end, where do we look? Well, the answer isn't in what people wrote centuries later, it's in what they were reading and thinking about in Jesus' actual time. Yeah, their real clues are hiding in plain sight. They're in the popular Jewish literature from that time, what scholars called the Second Temple period. These were the stories, the ideas, the scriptures that the people listening to Jesus would have known inside and out. Case in point, let's look at the book of Tobit, super popular story back then. In it, you've got the angel Raphael, and he gets sent on a mission. And what's the mission? To bind a demon named Asmodeus. The language is right there, crystal clear. And get this, what happens the moment the demon is bound? The story says its human victim, a woman named Sarah, is loosed from her suffering. You see that? Binding the evil thing directly leads to loosing the person who is being tormented. It's a package deal. And this isn't just a one-time thing, not at all. If you look at another huge book from that era, the Book of Enoch, you see this pattern again and again and again. Angels are told to bind the fallen angels. They're bound and chucked into a pit. So the takeaway here is massive. In the world Jesus was speaking to, binding had a very specific meaning. It meant putting the brakes on hostile spiritual forces. Okay, so the books from that time are a huge clue. But the real smoking gun, the evidence that just seals the deal, it actually comes from Jesus himself in a totally different story from the Gospels. Just listen to this. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus heals this woman who's been crippled for years. And when he's challenged on it, he says basically, hey, Satan has bound this woman for 18 long years. Shouldn't she be loosed from that bond? I mean, wow. He's using the exact same words, bind and loose, and it's all about a spiritual battle. It's right there in black and white, isn't it? In Jesus' own vocabulary, binding is what an evil spiritual power does to a person, and loosing is the act of setting them free. This has nothing to do with making church rules. This is about liberation. So we've got the language, we've got the context from the literature, we've got Jesus' own example. But there's one more piece to this puzzle, and honestly, it changes everything. It's not just what Jesus said, it's where he was standing when he said it. He gave this whole binding and loosing commission in a place called Caesarea Philippi. And trust me, to a first-century audience, that location was like a giant flashing neon sign. You see, Caesarea Philippi had a reputation, a really dark one. It was in an area anciently known as Bashan, which was legendary as the turf of the giant clans. It was right at the foot of Mount Hermon, the exact spot where the Book of Enoch says the fallen angels came down to earth. And to top it all off, it was famously nicknamed the Gates of Hades, a symbolic entrance to the underworld. I mean, this was ground zero for the enemy. So when Jesus stands there, of all places, and says, "The gates of Hades will not prevail against my church," he is not making a defensive promise. He's not saying, "Don't worry, the church will be safe when it gets attacked." He's making a declaration of war. Think about it. Gates are a defensive structure. The church isn't the one being attacked by the gates. The church is the one on the offense, storming the gates. It completely flips how we normally hear that phrase on its head. All right, so let's put it all together. We've seen the historical mistake, we've found the lost literary context, we've heard it from Jesus' own lips, and we've understood the incredible significance of the location. Now we can finally see what this mission was really all about. This table really breaks it down. The old way of thinking, it was all focused on church, government, discipline, rules. But the new understanding, the one that fits all the evidence, it's about a cosmic conflict. The main action isn't about setting rules. It's about setting captives free. The authority isn't about including or excluding people. It's about restraining demonic powers. So what's the big takeaway? The commission to bind and loose wasn't about starting a new religious bureaucracy. It was about launching an army of liberation commissioned to go out and enforce heaven's victory over the powers of darkness right here on earth. This changes everything, doesn't it? The original mission was never to build a fortress and hide inside. It was to take the keys, go on the attack, and storm the very gates of hell. And that leaves us with a pretty challenging question, right? Is the church today still on offense?